Hello, everybody, and welcome to the MedSafety Exchange webinar for the 24th day of 2024. I'm Mike Hamilton. I'm Medical Director at ISMP Canada. Again, a very big welcome to you. Thanks for joining us. We know things are very busy out there in healthcare, and we really do appreciate the great work you're doing. And we particularly appreciate having you in the audience participating with us. And I'll ask our producer, Carol, to take us through the next important items, beginning with the land acknowledgement. Carol?
Thank you. We begin with a land acknowledgement for our office in Toronto, and I encourage you to reflect upon where you work and reside. We acknowledge we are hosted on the lands of the Mississaugas of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and the Inuit peoples. We are grateful to live and work and play on this land, and we want to contribute to the implementation of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's 8 health-related calls to action. This webinar is a production of ISMP Canada and the Canadian Medication Incident Reporting and Prevention System, CMIRPS, with contribution from all of our partners in medication safety and you, the audience. The MedSafety Exchange is presented on the Zoom webinar platform. Audience members are automatically muted and your video is disabled. The presentation part of this webinar is being recorded and will be available on our website in about 2 weeks' time. There are a few ways to submit comments or questions. Find the Zoom toolbar, typically at the bottom of your screen. The chat panel is open for the broadcast, so feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. You can also make comments and ask questions via chat. All chat entries will be visible to the audience. If you select the Q&A tool, a window will open up. You have the option to submit anonymously if you wish by checking off the lower box. Responses will appear in the Q&A panel, and questions will only appear in the panel once they are answered. Please email us at medsafetyexchange@ismpcanada.ca for any questions that we don't get to, and we'll try to answer them offline. There will be an evaluation poll at the end of the session, and we encourage you to provide feedback. Now back to Dr. Hamilton for an overview of today's session.
Thanks so much, Carol. We do have a terrific webinar planned today with lots of great updates from Health Canada. One, an update on the self-care framework, and the second one on important work in biosimilars. We'll follow that up with news about a number of exciting initiatives from the team at ISMP Canada, including the launch of the Canadian Medication Safety Network. And time permitting, we'll also respond to some of your questions and comments at the end of the broadcast. Now, most of us and our friends and family practice forms of self-care, whether it's managing common coughs and colds or dealing with minor injuries. And for a lot of these conditions, we use some form of widely available, commercially available treatments and therapies. And we are very pleased to welcome Health Canada's Natural and Non-Prescription Health Products Directorate to provide us with an update of the progress on the self-care framework.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Hamilton, very much for the introduction and the invitation. Can everyone hear me? Yes? Perfect.
Very good.
Great. So we'll get started. So yes, my name is Anne Delorier, and as I said, I work for Health Canada's Natural and Non-Prescription Health Products Directorate in sort of a section that does both policy and stakeholder engagement. We're really pleased to have the opportunity to share some information today on recent Health Canada initiatives aimed at ensuring Canadians have access to a wide range of self-care products that are safe and effective. We know there's been, or you've probably heard in the news, there's a lot of discussion that's been going on recently about the regulation of natural health products in Canada. And quite frankly, we're pleased to see so many Canadians engaged on these important issues, and happy to be here today to share a little bit more about the work we're doing. So as we said, today's presentation will be centered around Health Canada's self-care framework. This is a framework that was designed to ensure that regulatory oversight for all self-care products is proportional to the level of risk, all while supporting consumer choice and safety. So today, in my presentation, I'll go through a bit of background on the framework itself, as well as tell you a bit about some of the recent initiatives that we have that are geared at modernizing the regulation of natural health products. So on the next slide, today we're going to begin with just a little bit of background on how we got to where we are today with respect to natural health product regulation in Canada. As you may or may not know, at least in Canada, the way it's defined, natural health products include a variety of products, which include vitamins, minerals, probiotics, toothpastes, sunscreens, homeopathic products, and traditional products. So for example, traditional Chinese medicines. Many of these products are used by Canadians on a daily basis to support their health, and more than 200,000 natural health products have been approved by Health Canada since 2004. It was in 2016 that Health Canada began to work on the self-care framework. And this was done in collaboration with a number of stakeholders, including ISMP. And since the beginning, the goal has been to modernize the way self-care products are regulated. Self-care framework initiatives are intended to better protect Canadians against health risks and harms, to reduce unnecessary regulatory burden and costs for industry and Canadians, and support Canadians' efforts to improve their own health and make informed decisions. A number of the changes that Health Canada had envisioned through the self-care framework ended up aligning with the recommendations of an audit that was done on the natural health products program by the Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development in 2021. So the audit ended up making recommendations that were very much in line with where we wanted to go. So it was sort of good news. The audit recommended things such as increased oversight for the quality of natural health products, greater monitoring of labeling and advertising, and improved product labeling, among others. In response to the audit, Health Canada committed to strengthening the identified areas for improvement. Notably, Health Canada signaled that it would seek to introduce fees for regulating natural health products to provide sustainable funding for the needed program improvements and for increased regulatory oversight. And it also committed to advancing natural health product labeling improvements and seeking to strengthen oversight tools by extending the powers conferred by the Protecting Canadians from Unsafe Drugs Act, or as many of you might know it, Vanessa's Law, to natural health products. I'm pleased to be able to say that in the past few years, in consultation with stakeholders, Health Canada has made significant progress towards its commitments to make the natural health product market safer for consumers in Canada and to help them make more informed choices. So on the next slide, please, we're moving on to natural health product labeling. So now I'll share a little bit more about some of the work we've been doing to advance some of the commitments that we made in response to the audit and in line with sort of advancing the work and the vision of the self-care framework. As some of you may know, in 2022, Health Canada introduced new requirements to make natural health product labels easier to read and understand, with the ultimate goal of supporting Canadians in selecting and safely using natural health products. Some of the new requirements include clear and prominently displayed label text with minimum font and contrast requirements, standardized product facts tables to enable consumers and healthcare professionals to quickly identify key product information to reduce medication errors and easily compare products, priority food allergens, gluten, sulfite, and aspartame indications must now be prominently displayed in the warning section. The label must display a telephone number, email address, or website address for a contact person. And there are other requirements as well. Some of those include security packaging, labeling of exempted products, and homeopathic medicine statements and risk-based evidence standards. So on the next slide, you'll see we've got a mock-up of sort of what labels used to look like as an example, and then sort of with these sort of new changes, what a new label might look like. As you can see, the information that consumers will see now should end up being much easier to read, which we hope will ultimately support Canadians in safely selecting and using natural health products. To minimize any potential impacts of these new requirements on industry, as we're also mindful of sort of these changes and the impacts, not just obviously for improving safety for Canadians, but also the impacts to industry, we have built in exemptions and flexibilities to enable the continued use of existing packaging sizes to the extent possible. And as well, Health Canada introduced a 6-year transition period to allow most companies to make these label changes at the normal sort of relabeling life cycle of their product, and cycle through their existing stock without having to recall or destroy any existing products. In terms of timelines for implementation of these new requirements, products that are authorized by Health Canada prior to June 21st, 2025, will have until June 22nd, 2028 to comply with the new labeling requirements. However, companies are encouraged to implement the improved labeling requirements as early as possible. Products that are authorized by Health Canada on or after June 21st, 2025 are expected to comply with the new labeling requirements immediately. So Health Canada will continue to work with stakeholders and retailers as necessary through the transition period to support the implementation of the new labeling requirements. Sam, I think we'll go to slide 7 now. The monograph revisions. So the next thing that we've been doing in order to support the implementation of the new labeling requirements is actively working to update the product monographs themselves. And we're doing this in consultation with industry to ensure that the monographs are revised to be clear and consistent. The revisions themselves will focus on improving conciseness, clarity, accuracy, and ensuring consistency between monographs, as we said, including examples of product facts tables in each monograph, and expanding the scope where possible. So for example, the addition of medicinal ingredients and/or claims for which the Natural and Non-Prescription Health Products Directorate has collected enough evidence and is comfortable with its availability through compendium. We're currently consulting with all license holders on these monograph revisions, and we're also working with an advisory group as we're working through this process, which ISMP is also a part of. Given the large number of monographs that require revisions, they will be sent, or they are being sent. The process actually started before the new year. They're being sent out in batches, and there'll be sort of specific consultation periods for each of the batches, just to make it more of a manageable process. And the revision process itself is expected to be completed by January 2025. So the next slide, please. I'll now speak a little bit about another initiative that we have underway to help advance the self-care framework vision. We talked a little bit about natural health products. However, as most of you probably know, Health Canada is also committed to simplifying market access for non-prescription drugs. As a first step, we've developed what we're calling the Non-Prescription Drug Action Plan, or as you may see throughout, the kind of NPD Action Plan for short. This action plan advances the concepts of the self-care framework, which, as you'll recall, one of the things that was a key element of the framework is reducing burden where possible, and aligning the level of oversight of non-prescription drugs proportional to the level of risk. As is the case probably for many people, the COVID pandemic certainly derailed sort of timings and some of our regulatory plans, including developing a proposal to amend the food and drug regulations to simplify market access for non-prescription drugs. So in advance, that remains the goal, and the plan is to actually make those more permanent amendments. But in advance of these more permanent regulatory changes, just to kind of provide some flexibility now when a lot of industry is indicating they could use it coming out of the pandemic in particular themselves, we've launched the Non-Prescription Drug Action Plan, which proposes policy and operational solutions that are designed to remove barriers for getting non-prescription drugs to market. These solutions will expedite market access for non-prescription drugs by removing some of the more cumbersome administrative requirements and introducing some flexibilities for industry. Here, I want to just make it very clear that these are solutions that are not intended or will not affect the health and safety of people in Canada who rely on these products. As I said, these are us sort of putting our heads together with industry and seeing where there was maybe repetitive requirements, or these are really sort of administrative changes that can make industry's life simpler while not at all sort of affecting the overall quality, health, or safety of the products. Some of the short-term solutions that we introduced in December 2022 included updates to the recommended and optional Canadian drug facts table subheadings. There was some additional guidance provided on the product monograph and patient medication information leaflet, and there was additional guidance for label mock-up requirements provided. Early this year, we're looking to share some of the medium-term solutions that we've been working on, so in the coming probably weeks, I would say. And these will include providing clarity on post-authorization submissions for quality-related changes, clarifying when non-prescription drug inactive ingredient expectations and the application of INCI names on non-prescription drug labeling, and publishing for consultation an oral cough, cold, and flu monograph to support the licensing of non-prescription drugs. Finalization for this is targeted for this summer. And now back to non-prescription health product, or natural health products, sorry, pardon me. So while NHPs, as most of you probably know and would agree, while they are generally lower risk products, that does not mean they are without risk. And that's why we do the work that we do. Health Canada has seen instances of serious non-compliance that could be harmful for consumers, such as product contamination and the presence of ingredients that are not listed on a label. In June of 2023, the government passed new legislation allowing Health Canada to take action when a serious or imminent risk to health is identified. An example of a serious or imminent risk is a product being contaminated with toxic elements, such as mold, lead, or E. coli. That would be one of them. Extending the Protecting Canadians from Unsafe Drugs Act, or Vanessa's Law as we know it, to natural health products provides Health Canada with the authority to strengthen its post-market oversight of NHPs with the ultimate goal of protecting the health and safety of Canadians. As an example, Health Canada is now able to order a product recall, or add warnings on labels to support safe use if necessary. This is something we couldn't do previously. These new authorities would only need to be used if a serious risk to health is identified and if a company refuses to take voluntary actions to address the risks. So compliant companies really will not or should not be affected by these changes. Some provisions that require regulations, so to date, the changes that have been brought forward have been legislative, not regulatory, is the distinction. So some of the provisions that will require regulatory changes are not yet in force. For example, the requirement that healthcare institutions report serious adverse reactions. Health Canada will be consulting with stakeholders on any further regulatory changes that we need to make in order to support these authorities when the time comes to advance this work. Now we'll go to the next slide. So those were some of the bigger initiatives, but there's obviously, as you can imagine, a number of things underway that we're doing in order to support the advancement of the self-care framework and respond to the audit recommendations. Some of the other initiatives that we have underway to support this work and improve the natural health product program in Canada include risk-based quality screening, which is now being applied to new product license and quality amendment applications submitted as of November 1st of 2023. These will focus on ingredient quality tolerance limits. There will be a consultation coming up shortly on updates to the natural health products guidance documents. These are quality guidance documents and good manufacturing practices guidance documents. So we'll be doing a lot of work on that through sort of this winter and spring. There's also a proactive inspection program that we're working on. So from 2021 to 2022, Health Canada conducted a pilot inspection program to assess whether natural health product manufacturers and importers were following regulatory requirements for GMPs, or good manufacturing practices. The findings of the pilot reinforced the need for a permanent, proactive, risk-based inspection program to verify compliance and ensure that natural health products that are sold in Canada are safe and of high quality. So work continues on the program itself. Now, next slide. I'm not sure, some of you may know this already, some of you may not, but Health Canada relies currently solely on public funding for the regulatory services it provides to industry for regulating natural health products. Regulatory services for other health products, so drugs, medical devices that are regulated by Health Canada, are funded through a mix of service fees and public funding. This summer, Health Canada put forward a proposal, as we said we would do, to consult on a fee structure for recovering some of the costs of running the natural health product program. So there was a consultation that took place over the summer and closed on August 10th. There was a high level of interest in the proposal itself, being the first time that the natural health product industry would be looking at paying some fees. So we appreciate the high level of interest. If any of you that are listening today happen to be someone that took the time to provide feedback, we thank you and are greatly appreciative. We've been working through all of the feedback we've received since the summer to come up with a proposal that sort of mitigates the impacts of cost recovery on small businesses in particular in Canada, but while continuing to support Health Canada's effort to provide market access to a wide variety of safe and effective health products. So if you're interested in this, definitely more to come on cost recovery in the months to come. So that concludes my presentation for today. Hopefully this was informative for many of you. As you'll see on this last slide here, there's just a few ways that you can reach us to obtain more information if you're interested. So there's an email address, and that's my team monitors this inbox. So we'd be happy to get any inquiries you have to the right people and support answering those. There's also a link to a website that has a lot of information on some of the initiatives that I've just spoken to you about today. I've got a colleague on the line as well, Rebecca Bew, who's here. So we'll be happy if you have any questions for us at the end of the session to try to do our best to answer them. And once again, thank you very much for allowing us to share some of this information with you today. And I'll turn it back over to Dr. Hamilton. Thank you.
Thanks very much. It's really evident that there's a tremendous amount of work going on related to these products and a surprisingly large amount of products to work on. Frankly, it's really sort of the breadth of different types of products that we don't really appreciate as sort of being under the purview of Health Canada. So thank you. I also want to note that you've been kind enough to send a French version of the slides, and we'll provide a link to these on our MedSafety Exchange website when we post our recording, probably within at least within a couple of weeks, but probably sooner. So thank you so much. And we'll now turn our attention to biosimilars. Over the last few years, the number of biosimilar products in Canada has really increased dramatically. And consumers and clinicians often confuse biosimilars as a generic form of an already available product. There are some important differences in sort of how we think about these two concepts. And to help us, Health Canada has been developing educational materials, and we are very pleased to have them present on some of the ongoing efforts in the sphere of biosimilars. So I will transfer control of the slides, and please go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Hamilton, for that introduction. Hello, everyone. So my name is Denis Arsenault. I am a manager with the Centre for Policy, Pediatrics and International Collaboration in Health Canada's Biologic and Radiopharmaceutical Drugs Directorate. So I'm pleased to be here and happy for the invitation to speak to you about our biosimilar stakeholder education materials that we've been developing. So a little too quickly there. So I'll just start with just a bit of an outline in terms of the regulatory context. I'd like to talk a little bit about guidance documents and fact sheets of the materials we have, just to give a bit of context, and then I will get into a discussion of our educational materials. So as most of you know, so a biosimilar, it's a biologic drug that's highly similar to a biologic drug that was previously authorized for sale in Canada, and that previously authorized product we refer to as the reference biologic drug. So biosimilars, they're subject to the Food and Drugs Act, and they're authorized under Division 8 of the Food and Drug Regulations, just like any other biologic drug. And biosimilars, like new drugs, are authorized under the New Drug Submission Pathway. So BRDD, or as we like to call it, the Biologic and Radiopharmaceutical Drugs Directorate, we are responsible for the scientific evaluation and the authorization of biologic drugs, including biosimilars, under the Food and Drug Regulations. So Health Canada has various guidance documents to help industry sponsors who are intending to make a drug submission to seek market authorization in Canada. The main one is called the MDSA, the Marketed Drugs. There's the main guidance document that is intended to help sponsors seeking authorization in Canada. But in the case of biosimilars, we have very specific guidance document, which is called the Information Submission Requirements for Biosimilar Biologic Drugs. And that outlines the very specific requirements related to biosimilar drug candidates. So in addition to guidance to industry, we also have a fact sheet which we've developed a number of years ago, but which we updated in 2019. That's aimed at a kind of a broader audience and explains what are biosimilars, how do they differ from generic drugs, and how are they authorized in Canada. But one thing we heard repeatedly from our stakeholders, from a wide variety of stakeholders for a number of years, is that there was a need for kind of very targeted education materials aimed specifically and tailored at patients and healthcare professionals. What we were told is that, okay, fine, you have a fact sheet, but it's perhaps a bit too detailed for a patient audience, but it's not detailed enough for healthcare professionals who would have kind of more pointed questions. So of course we retained the fact sheet, but we agreed on the need to, again, develop some more targeted information materials. And one thing I would say is that Health Canada, over the last years, as you all know, a number of provinces, and most provinces at this point, have implemented switching policies, switching patients from the reference biologic drugs to their biosimilars. And each time there was a switching policy of that nature that was announced, so we noticed there was an uptick in the kind of queries that we would receive regarding biosimilars. So we clearly saw the need to have these kind of educational materials. So in response to all of that, we decided to develop as I said, our education materials. And we've noticed, of course, our regulatory counterparts in other countries, like the Food and Drug Administration in the United States and the European Medicines Agency, they had developed their own kind of targeted materials. So taking inspiration from that, we've now developed a biosimilars biologic drugs infographic aimed at patients, which was published in the spring of last year. And in November of last year, we published the Handbook for Healthcare Professionals on Biosimilar Biologic Drugs. So for the biosimilars infographic, again, through conversations with other regulators, because they had done some audience testing, if you will, if I could say it that way, in terms of what kind of materials that would work best for patients. And it was very clear that for patients, it's something very short, like very clear, very concise wording. So one page. And so we decided to develop this kind of one pager, trying to communicate information visually in order to really, this is something that, for example, pharmacists or other healthcare practitioners could simply print out and hand to patients to give them a little bit of information regarding biosimilars. But I would say the main deliverable, if you will, of this project has been the handbook for healthcare professionals. So the aim of this handbook, which takes inspiration from a similar handbook that was developed by the European Medicines Agency, the main objective is to provide evidence-based information on the regulation and the scientific basis for the authorization of biosimilars by Health Canada. So by giving this kind of information, its purpose is to increase understanding and confidence in biosimilars among healthcare professionals as a potential treatment option. And I have to say that I think it's important to emphasize that given our regulatory role, the purpose of the handbook is not promotional in nature. What we're seeking to do is simply explain how biosimilars are regulated in Canada, to show that there's a rigorous regulatory process and the scientific basis upon which Health Canada authorizes biosimilars. So to that end, to develop this handbook, we struck a working group in 2021, and it was composed of departmental subject matter experts around biosimilars, but also representatives from health professional associations in order to guide the development of the handbook. And again, it was taking inspiration from the European model, where there was a kind of a collaborative approach to developing the handbook to make sure that we're answering the kind of questions that health professionals would have and making sure we have that kind of right level of detail in answering those questions. So after development, the handbook underwent an extended public consultation in the spring of 2022. We received a wide number of comments from industry associations, innovator biologic manufacturers, health professional associations, and patient organizations. So there was a very extensive review process of those comments that we received, and the working group, as well as Health Canada staff, after going through those comments, we had amended the handbook as deemed appropriate, and the final version was published in November of last year. So the handbook addresses a number of topics, and I won't go into detail in terms of the content of the handbook. I think I would encourage everyone to take a look at that, and the link is provided in this presentation. So, but at a high level, the deck, or the handbook, should I say, addresses the nature of biologic drugs and biosimilars, and the distinction between biosimilar and generic drugs that was referred to earlier, and really digs into the data requirements that are for the authorization of biosimilars, as well as their indications. There's also a section dealing with immunogenicity, which we know is a concern to some, and the post-market monitoring of biosimilars. There are other issues that are also addressed as well, perhaps less so, things like switching policies, interchangeability, reimbursement. Now, those kinds of issues, because they are not within the remit of Health Canada, so we don't delve too much into detail into that, because that is not the primary purpose of the handbook, but we did feel that it was important to at least acknowledge those issues. So I'll just close it there, but I would encourage everyone to take a look at the handbook, and I'd like to thank you for taking the time to listen to this presentation.
Thank you so much, Denis. A whole lot of excellent material here, and I do promise we will pull all the links off the slide deck and put them in our on our website. There's a lot of good materials, and I think particularly ones directed towards patients and caregivers are going to be very important, but even sort of clinicians are going to be able to use the biosimilar educational materials that you published. Thank you so much. And now we'll proceed with some updates on the many initiatives that ISMP Canada is undertaking. We'll begin with Melissa and the Canadian Medication Safety Network. Melissa, go ahead.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, and good morning and good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for being here. My name is Melissa Sheldrick, and I'm the Patient and Family Advisor here at ISMP Canada. I am so thrilled to be here to tell you about the brand new Canadian Medication Safety Network. This is a network of healthcare providers and patients and families who want to learn more about medication safety and share their experiences. We are going to collaborate to identify and address potential risks or issues. We know the value of patient and provider collaboration in improving medication safety for people in Canada, and that's why we have created this community of learning. You are here today because you have an awareness of the risks and benefits associated with medications, and you're likely aware of the harm that can occur when medication errors happen. And we know that a great deal of this harm is preventable. But how do we actually work together to find ways to prevent the harm? When we bring residents and patients and caregivers together with healthcare providers, patient safety, quality improvement specialists, students, and other stakeholders, we create a community of like-minded individuals who want to move the medication safety needle forward across the country. So this network will engage people who reflect the diversity of people in Canada from coast to coast to coast. And by providing a platform to exchange ideas and dialogue, we will all learn about what is going well with medications and where there is room for improvement. We know medication safety is not just a Canadian problem, this is a global concern. And so the ability to engage with each other is going to foster increased communication, and we'll work together to move it forward here in Canada. So there are three main goals that we have established that the network will achieve. Firstly, that sense of community that will be created to allow an exchange of ideas from the unique lens that each individual brings. There is critical data and insights to be learned from each other, and we know that informed and shared decisions are a cornerstone of patient safety. Healthcare providers will bring their clinical expertise, consumers will bring their expertise with real-world insights, and bringing these diverse perspectives together will lead to a more holistic approach to medication safety. Secondly, obtaining information and advice from everybody, all the experts, is just so valuable, and participant engagement will be core to the success of this network. And that's why the Canadian Medication Safety Network strives to be accessible to all Canadians and all people across the country, and the active participation will be the key to learning from each other. ISMP Canada has been a trusted source of medication safety information for over 20 years. And as new information emerges and the medication landscape changes, you can rely on ISMP Canada to be dialed into reliable, evidence-based information. So this is the very beginning of this network, and it is going to continuously grow and be shaped with active participation from all of those who register. We're planning to offer interactive webinars throughout the year, as well as developing a social media presence, seeking advice and information from participants, and then facilitating a dialogue will really be the key to advancing the impact of this network. So this will be done through polls, surveys, social media, lots of different ways. Our first webinar will be in 2 weeks' time on February 7th, and we will welcome Dr. Lee Chapman, Chief Nursing Officer of Canada, who will give us a short keynote address to kick off the event. She comes with a wide scope of experience and has been learning from healthcare professionals from across the country in her current role. And then we will break out and engage in dialogue with each other. So how do you get involved? You can scan this QR code, and that will take you to a registration form for the network itself. So complete the registration form and submit it, and then you will receive a welcome email in your inbox. Only network registrants at this time are going to receive an invitation to the webinar. Our participant list is growing exponentially. We're so excited to get this off the ground. I'm also going to put some links in the chat box for you that you can follow to the registration forms. And then once you submit your form, just keep an eye on your inbox for information about the network, webinars, and other events that are coming up. You can expect some periodic emails, but we promise we won't flood your inbox. So thank you for listening. I encourage you all to sign up. The more voices we can engage in, the better, and we can all work together to improve medication safety for people across the country. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Melissa. Really looking forward to the session in a couple weeks. And we really encourage everyone to sign up and participate. I think it'd be a really good time. And I think, are welcoming people from all walks of life in health-related and non-health-related disciplines, because most of us at some point or another are going to be taking medicines, and we want to make sure that everything is done to make it as safe as possible. Thanks so much. And for the last number of months, ISMP Canada has been working along with its partners and stakeholders and a number of great individuals from across the country on a Canadian high alert medication list. It's nearing completion, and we are very pleased to soon be releasing the list, a related safety bulletin, and a user guide that we really hope will be helpful to everyone in implementing or creating a list and implementing one in your own work environment. So please look for that in the near future. We're very excited, and we're particularly excited about the feedback that you're able to give us. And in addition to the high alert list, we're always working on issues reported by you, consumers, practitioners, and you may have seen our recent social media post about errors related to the name of a drug delivery device being confused with the actual medication to be delivered. And in this slide, for example, Solostar is the name of the device that contains different types of insulin. And relatedly, we encourage you to report any errors or concerns that you have experienced or that you're aware of related to issues with these types of delivery devices that carry a name and medications. These might include things like insulins, like respiratory inhalers that deliver medications, or anything else that you can think of. We certainly do receive incidents related to this issue, and we'd love to hear more about what you have experienced. And that's not all. We do have recent and upcoming safety bulletins regarding pre-pouring of medications, one fascinating one about psychological safety, and an interesting one about e-prescribing errors in the community. Technology is a great boon and can make things much safer, but sometimes there's issues in interoperability and implementation that can cause errors. And important consumer topics coming up include issues related to eye drops and confusing vitamin brand names. So look for those in the near future. And now I'll invite our presenters, Denis and Anne, to come back, and we'll answer some of your questions. We've had a very active chat box and today, and we very much thank you for submitting your comments, and certainly thanks to all the panelists for sharing their experience. So I think there's been a few questions come up. I'll just turn my attention to them, and I'll start with Anne. And one of the questions is, it's relatively easy today to purchase products from countries on the internet. That must be a concern to Health Canada. So how much do elements of the self-care framework align with international efforts? And what powers does Health Canada have to really prevent the online sale and delivery to Canada of concerning products?
Sure. Yeah, I'll do my best to answer that one. And I'll just add as well that we've seen that there's a number of questions in the chat, and we're just taking them down because there probably won't be time to address all of them today. So we've taken note of them, and if that makes sense, we'll kind of prepare some answers, share them back with ISMP, and then they can be, happily shared out, but might just be the more efficient way. But I'll certainly address this this question today. In terms of international comparisons, it's a difficult one to it's difficult to make international comparisons because the way that NHP, like what is considered an NHP, what is like how their costs are covered, it's very different from country to country. We do keep an eye and very much do try and where possible sort of align with other international standards, but again, the way they're regulated and what's considered a natural health product versus non-prescription is very different from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. That being said, yes, we're very much concerned with sort of the safety of this and the ability to purchase from different mechanisms. What we will say is that in Canada, all companies that sell natural health products online, whether domestic or international, must comply with Canadian regulations to keep people in Canada safe. Canadian residents and visitors. They can import but a 90-day supply or a single-use course of treatment for a natural health product or any other health product for personal use without requiring kind of these specific licenses. However, where possible, Canadians are definitely encouraged to buy licensed health products, obviously, that are licensed in Canada, that have been assessed by Health Canada to be safe and effective for use according to their directions. I would say Health Canada is, we're definitely responsible for monitoring health product compliance and enforcement activities. So we're keeping an eye on some of this so that the monitoring is taking place and that the requirements and the rules are being followed and compliance is happening as it should be. So there is an oversight component. We work in partnership with the CBSA, so Canada Border Services Agency, to assess compliance of health products that have been referred to us at the border as coming through that may or may not sort of meet Canadian requirements. And sort of the collecting of fees that we're looking to do moving forward to cost recover. These are expected to sort of help us fund greater education, guidance, and be able to do more inspections to have the oversight, because obviously the internet is such a huge place that monitoring it does become challenging. So we acknowledge that, but certainly the efforts are there to encourage Canadians to definitely only use products that have been reviewed and are being regulated by Health Canada. So hopefully that answers the question or provides at least a little bit of clarity.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. I'm surprised, but I shouldn't be surprised actually that you do work with the Border Service Agency, because that's sort of an important safeguard in things entering the country. So good knowledge. Thank you. Denis, question for you. Similarly to generic drugs and the originator drug equivalent, there's also a perception by patients, there's often a perception by patients that biosimilars are not quite as effective as their biologic originator drug. And biosimilars are a difficult concept to convey to patients. And I think the question is there a possibility that Health Canada could do more education for patients and caregivers, or is there anything planned for the future?
Yeah, no, that was a great question. So no, for sure. I think the concept of biosimilarity, I think, can be challenging to communicate to patients in terms of, what's the distinction between a generic, which is bioequivalent, versus a biosimilar, which is to be highly similar, and what does highly similar mean? And it's those kinds of questions precisely that actually led us to develop the infographic as well as the handbook. What I can say is that, right now, we don't have any plans to develop other materials right now, but that could certainly change in the future. I think the context has changed a bit since we first decided to actually develop these materials, because it took us about, I would say, a good 3 years, a bit more, partly because of the pandemic, led to some delays. But the landscape has changed. So in addition to the materials that we've developed that I talked about today, there's also a new massive open online course on biosimilars that was developed by Ontario Health and the University of Toronto School of Pharmacy. We participated in that. So that is, there's a two-pronged element to that. One is aimed at the general public for patients, but it's also the other aspect, which is for healthcare professionals. That's an accredited course for healthcare professionals around biosimilars. Again, that's not a Health Canada initiative, although we did participate to develop the regulatory component of that course. In addition, as I said, most provinces now have switching policies, and in doing so, they prepare their own educational materials, again, for healthcare professionals and patients. So I think there's a lot more materials out there available now on biosimilars, both for patients and healthcare professionals, than there were even just, I'd say, 4 or 5 years ago. So the context has changed quite a bit. So we're aiming to, of course, promote the handbook and the infographic. And if we see there's a specific need in the future for additional materials, it's certainly something that we could consider. Although, as I said, there's nothing specific planned at the moment.
Thank you, Denis, and thank you, Anne and Denis, again, for answering a few questions. We won't be able to get to all of them, but if you do have further questions as an audience member, as an audience participant, Please forward them to our email address, medsafetyexchange@ismpcanada.ca, and we will continue to get answers as we can, and we'll post them up on the MedSafety Exchange website. So as we close, I'd like to again thank all the presenters for the terrific learning that they shared today and their efforts to improve patient care. And we'd also like to thank you, the audience, for learning along with us. This webinar marks the end of our 7th season of webinars. So we welcome any comments you have about how to make the 8th season better, things you like, things you don't like, things you would change. Really appreciate your input into this. Please let us know what you think by contacting us or completing the feedback poll. Again, we learn from stories and we learn from conversations about errors. We learn about them from multiple perspectives, the patient, the practitioner, the system. Please share your experience and stories with us in order to make care better. And please consider being part of the MedSafety Exchange. You saw how terrific the presentations and presenters were today. We encourage you to be a part of that. Again, a link to the recording of this webinar will be available on the MedSafety Exchange website in the coming days, along with links to all the great materials that we've had presented today. And the PDF slides is available upon request to the email address on the slide. And in closing, we look forward to seeing you all again in May 2024. So please have a terrific rest of the day, and thank you for joining us. So long, everybody.